Good morning, everyone. I am Tim Mullen. I'm the Director of Market Regulation at the NAIC and staff support for the NAIC's Producer Licensing Task Force. And this morning, so we hope this to be an interactive session. So for those coming in, come on up to the front. We'll have a Q&A format, and we're going to talk about collaboration of licensing and enforcement between insurance and the securities financial services industry. So that's kind of what we're going to cover this morning. Before we jump into the learning objectives, I want to do some quick introductions of the panelists. On my far left is Jared Kirby. He currently serves as the Deputy Insurance Commissioner for the Iowa Insurance Division. He was appointed to this position in 2019 by Insurance Commissioner Doug Oman. Jared began his career with the division in 2006 as a law enforcement officer in the Fraud Bureau and was a law enforcement officer in Iowa prior to joining the department. So welcome, Jared. Happy to have you here. Next to Jared is Courtney Kotobosh. She is the Licensing Division Director at the Oklahoma Insurance Department, where she oversees the regulation of the individuals, both on the agency side and the individual producer side. Prior to working with the department, she was a P&C agent. And I note that you specialize in adjuster licensing matters, so maybe we'll blend those in. And a fun fact about Courtney, nobody else gave me a fun fact, but Courtney did. She plays the harmonica, but she did not bring it with her here, but it's in the building. So if you need to go get your harmonica.
Okay.
You know.
Well, the elevators are real slow. So.
Okay. And then to my immediate left is Steve Fromholtz, who is with the Arizona Department of Insurance. He's been with the Arizona Department of Insurance since 2003 and is currently the division manager of the licensing division for the department. He's got a lot of responsibilities, the mortgage industry, financial services industries, real estate appraisers, and insurance professionals. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about Karen Horning's comments yesterday. There apparently are a lot of occupational licenses.
A lot of
there,
yep. I can attest to that.
Okay. So before we begin, I want to quickly give an overview of some of the learning objectives, and also for those online, welcome to the session. As we go through the session, we'll be watching chat. So if you have a question as we go through, please let us know. The learning objectives for this morning: understand the necessity of coordinated regulatory approaches for professionals licensed in both the insurance and securities industry, explore best practices for enhancing collaboration between insurance and securities regulators, and then gain insights into fostering a cohesive and efficient regulatory environment through interagency cooperation. So those are the three primary learning objectives for this morning. And then this slide is a list of topics we're going to go through. So again, we'll have a Q&A format. As we go through the session, if there's questions people want to ask, please raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you to cover some of those questions you might have. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the questions. And I'm going to start with the first category there, insurance licensing and securities license. And I think we're going to start with Jared on the far end there. In Iowa, there's securities and insurance under one umbrella. So wanted to ask Jared and other panelists, what are some of the differences between the initial licensing process for insurance compared to securities? And do you see any benefits in terms of that process, whether it be on the security side or the insurance side, or are there distinct differences in that process that warrant or differences in the license that warrant differences in the processes.
Well, I'd just like to take a moment to get to know the audience a little bit. So by show of hands, who handles securities in their licensing in their agencies? All right. Well, come on up. We got an extra chair here.
That's right. Yeah.
So I just have to give a bit of disclosure too. I recently inherited the licensing pieces of our division, so I am swimming to try and get up to speed. I had some exposure through criminal investigations and things of that nature that help provide a bit of foundation. But as we talk about kind of these, what distinguishes the differences, with it being inside our division, we have for years tried to make it consistent between when we seek it to deny a license on the insurance side, well, what's the security side doing? So that's kind of the foundation there. I see a lot of similarities in the work you do. You really have regulated entities looking at the education, the abilities, the requisite character of an individual, and determine whether we want them in the living rooms of our Iowa consumers. And that's really on both sides. So in my mind, it should really be, the outcomes of these decisions should be fairly consistent. Within our office, we have it set up to make sure that there's touch points when we can. Now, not always does it work perfectly, but I think we certainly have the intent there and the staff up to speed on how things should go. So when we look at some of the distinguishing differences, the platforms are clearly different. In IPR, the insurance side, the individual can just decide, I'm going to be an insurance agent, and go, fill out the application and take the testing through Pearson VUE and pass, fail, produce the documents, that sort of thing, and get approved. On the security side, they use CRD, and that's really handled through FINRA. We really, unless there's a disclosure coming to Iowa, it's really a pass-through. But once those disclosures come in, that's where our staff really kind of gets involved with it. And that's on the insurance side. Those individuals are really looking at the individual requisite character, any disclosures, engaging them, right? On the security side, that's really, when there's a disclosure, that's really where it picks up and we start to ask questions about what item might have been disclosed. And when they're attempting to get their license. And of course, they'll take their Series 63 and 66, different FINRA exams. So there's some other differences. The backgrounds, as I talked about, will go into a fairly decent depth on both sides of the house. But again, a lot of that work's done through FINRA on the security side. The approvals inside the division, our licensing folks are, when it hits certain stages, we'll talk about whether somebody should be denied a license, right? We have processes for that, and it really gets down to, can this person be trusted? If you think about, if they did something 20 years ago and they went through the court proceeding, paid their dues and that sort of thing, can a person not be trusted at some point in time? So it's not necessarily felony, right off, you're out, things of that nature, but we talk about that and learn from those and make sure we're checking consistency as we encounter those new scenarios for licenses. That's a little bit about from my perspective.
Anyone else? So just kind of following up on that process, Jared, I don't know if you can answer this question, but in terms of somebody who's licensed, are there situations where somebody may obtain an insurance license but not a securities license, or vice versa, as they go through that process, whether there's disclosures or the questions on the application that might disqualify somebody on the security side but maybe not on the insurance side? Or have you seen that?
Yeah, we have seen where we try and eliminate those situations actually as they come up, where if our our licensing team on the insurance side has denied a license, security side is going to know about it. Whether it's, and there's not an automated system for that right now. We're trying to make it as put some infrastructure in there to make sure that there's forced conversations. But yeah, we have seen those scenarios where we're not going to issue an insurance license, and then we have opportunities to go look at why on the security side. Are there actions in a state that occurred after a license was issued? Well, what we would do in that situation is Commissioner Oman is our hearing officer, and what we've learned through hearings with him is he's going to want to know why in that state did that person, what was that order about? And it's not necessarily that in Iowa law, the legislature contemplated that we would check and be cognizant of other state activity. So in our statute, it provides for opportunities that if the license is denied, revoked, or whatever in another state, we could technically under the law take the license just for that. But when we do that, when we talk about coordination, we'll want the physical evidence that your office has obtained and support for the license denial. And then we'll make our decisions based on what we have. Typically, we may have something else in terms of evidence against the individual. Maybe they lied on the form or whatever. But so we do have that where that occurs.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So taking off the last comment, lying on the form, I want to talk to Steve a little bit about non-disclosure on an application. How do you identify a non-disclosure? And what do you do once you identify something like that?
Yeah, so part of the application for the insurance, as most folks know, is the NAIC NIPR Model Act and the uniform questions on the application itself. So as far as non-disclosure goes, one of the questions does ask if they've been a party to an administrative proceeding, including FINRA actions. And so when we have applicants that apply for the variable line of authority, our staff do go to FINRA's broker check. We look them up, check to see if there's been any actions, things along those lines. If it's found or discovered that there was an action, and FINRA's site's pretty good because you can get a lot of information off of it through the disclosure area. Then at that point, we will review the action and make that determination if it was a disclosable activity. And if it should have been disclosed at that point, the department does reach out to the applicants to inquire for the reason of non-disclosure. Was it an error? A lot of people think, like a credit report, things fall off after 7 years. As most of us know, administrative actions follow your lifetime. They don't fall off after 7 years. So in most cases, we allow the individual to cure the application if they've submitted it without those disclosures. And by curing it, generally, it's resubmitting a new application and correctly answering the questions on the new application, but they are given that opportunity to do that. If they choose not to do that, then the department does have that ability to deny the application for providing incorrect, misleading, incomplete, or material untrue information in the license application. And so that also is part of the PLMA. That's part of Arizona law. And so we do take it seriously from the fact that, the applicants applying for insurance license are professional applicants. They should be familiar with paperwork, reading questions, interpreting those questions, and we believe the questions on the application are very clear. So while we do give that opportunity for them to cure, we also won't just kind of bypass it and let them not answer the question. So generally, we discover it through FINRA broker check, and as long as they disclose it or offer to disclose it on a resubmitted application, we would generally have no problems issuing it. Of course, that's all predicated on the nature of the action itself. If it is a significant action, then obviously we wouldn't give them the offer to cure it if we knew we were going to deny it based upon the content of what that action was. So there are a few different steps we do look at in that whole process, but that's generally how it would work.
And from Courtney or Jared on that?
No, it's pretty much the same in Oklahoma.
Okay. All right. So following up with Steve, can you maybe just walk through the process in a little more detail? When somebody applies for a variable line of authority in Arizona, what's the process you follow
Mhm.
to verify their status on the security side,
Right. So
and kind of the due diligence that you have
yep.
in place?
So I kind of referenced a lot of that in the previous question. But again, we would go to FINRA broker check variable in Arizona. We charge by the license, not by line of authority. So you can apply for property, casualty, life, and health. It's the same fee as if you just applied for property. So we do run into situations where people just start checking boxes, notice the fees don't necessarily change. So maybe they sell life insurance, they don't sell variable, but they checked the box because it was available, and hey, why not? And so in those cases, they're not going to have the CRD number, things along those lines. So we do check that, verify with the applicants that they are seeking to obtain a variable. They also click credit and travel also, by the way. So it's life, credit, travel, variable. And sometimes they only want that lifeline of authority because, credit and travel are different than variable as far as the functionality of it. We don't follow up on the credit and travel if they really wanted it. But with variable, we do make sure that it's actually a line of authority. They should have the CRD number. They should be able to run through a broker check. If there's any type of situation where it's happened concurrently, we obviously allow for that and take that into the review of the application. Outside of broker check, we still would follow all of the normal processes that an application would go under, making sure and checking the RIARS database, making sure there's not those types of actions. If they're residents, we do run a fingerprint background check, so that gets involved in it as well. So we do look at a few different steps for variable, but it still goes through the entire process of what any individual applicant for a resident would go through.
You'd mentioned the CRD number. Do any of you face challenges having the correct CRD number?
This is the correct NPN when they email us the correct CRD number when they apply. Yeah.
So sometimes you get junk on the CRD number.
Yeah, but it's not that difficult if they have a name like mine, Stephen Frumholtz. We search by last name. If it's Bob Smith, we definitely run into problems if they're not putting in their correct CRD number.
Yeah, I would offer, we kind of treat it like a disclosure. If a person seeks a license for variable, we've got a form that our licensing team fills out and sends over to our surveillance analyst that monitors the disclosures and just walks through the same process, all the same techniques that they use to determine the disclosures are appropriate or not, background, social media, some of those different things to make certain that the individual's fit for duty, if you will.
All right. Any questions as we're going through? Any comments? All right. Well, let's continue on. The next category there you see is collaboration with security counterparts. I want to ask Courtney a little bit as we had a planning call, and I've talked to the various states. Some states, right, have very close relationships with their security counterparts. Some states maybe don't engage that much on the security side with their counterparts. So I want to talk to Courtney a little bit about what in Oklahoma, what are some of the ways you coordinate both on the state security side and then also with FINRA as you go through kind of your daily responsibilities?
So in Oklahoma, it seems really, really loud. Sorry. In Oklahoma, our securities division is a separate state agency. I'll be honest, I didn't even meet the person over the securities in Oklahoma until a SILA conference 2 years ago, and she's delightful. So it was really nice meeting her and kind of putting a face with the woman behind the curtain, because we really didn't have a whole lot of interaction with them other than directing our licensees to that department when they needed something to supplement their application. When they asked me to weigh in on this question, I made sure that they were pretty clear, because what recommendations do I have? Well, I have a wish list. So here we go. A lot of these things are just a wish list, but right now FINRA and NASA, they don't report their actions to the NEIC's RIAR system. And that would be on my wish list. As a regulator, it would be perfect to be able to log in. And as you're looking for your RIARs for your licensee, to be able to see securities RIARs or, securities actions in the same system. They would show up just like a state action. And then also, in the spirit of reciprocity, it would be wonderful if we shared our information with them. So currently, we're at the mercy of the applicant for reporting their actions, and we're at the mercy of the accuracy of the broker check system, which, from what I've been told, it's pretty accurate. So no complaints there with that. I took a look in our emails, or my emails, because for a long time we were getting notifications from FINRA and NIPR about actions. And it would just be an email with a link every month that would come out. These are all of the actions. You would click the link, go through, search Oklahoma, find any actions on that email. But it looks like the last time I received an email was mid-2022. So it would be great if we got those emails again. Otherwise, I just have it on my calendar and the link is saved in my favorites. And I just have to remember every month to go in and check for the prior month to see if any FINRA actions were reported in that system. I think that the best recommendation for like a short-term solution is that all state licensing agencies should require those licensees to upload those FINRA actions to the warehouse. We get a lot of applications that come in with yes answers, nothing in the warehouse, and then between pulling their teeth and shaving their heads, we have to somehow get them to report those FINRA actions to us. So, once they do get them, we tell them to upload them to the warehouse. It can be shared, it's instantly shared among regulators at that time. So, let's see. I lost track of my notes. I'm really sorry for the silence. There was a time when it was discussed with states that we should be finding that the state agencies should be getting these reports from FINRA, and then through our enforcement or legal divisions, our agencies should be uploading those FINRA actions to the warehouse. And this was several years ago when this discussion happened. And I know through discussion with other state regulators that it's just really not something that a lot of legal divisions want to take on. I know in Oklahoma, we toss it back and forth. We talk about it. Our legal division is not willing to take every FINRA action and upload it to RIARs on behalf of FINRA. It just feels like we're doing something that they should be doing. So it's not that we're closed off, or any other regulators that I've discussed this issue. We're not completely shut off to doing that. It's just something that right now it's not the perfect path forward for us. Lots of different reasons why it doesn't work for all states. I would recommend that every licensing division try to have these conversations with your legal department. Understand, in case you're asked, understand why you're not uploading those, or what would be the best way for your department to handle them. I also have a recommendation for looking at and developing best practices and guidance for this in the state licensing handbook if it's needed, because that's the baby I'm feeding this year. So, and that's it. That's what I have. Oh, I also would.
I thought you were done.
No,
Carry on.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Well,
I did.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Now
It's
I feel
okay.
terrible.
It's Jared's fault.
So she actually tried to haze me yesterday.
No.
She said, here, quote, did you get the email about the attire that we're supposed to wear for this event, like your favorite college team shirt? And so you had one coming to you anyway.
Right.
So we all act like you like each other up here, but so if you can get your train of thought, that'd be great. I'll carry the water here for a little bit. So I would come at from a different angle. When we talk about collaboration of securities counterparts, there's the licensing function that she just described, kind of that process, right? But there's also the process of like your law enforcement officers within your divisions that are attempting to get securities fraud information or disclosure information from these various NASA or FINRA. And like right now, FINRA does, when they have a case, typically when an action's been taken, they do personally communicate with our fraud bureau director and send that information out to them. So, and that may be in every state, but I felt I felt special for a little bit. If everybody raised their hands like, yeah, we get those too, I get that. But we have communicated with them. I had a case a number of years ago on a promissory. I had saw some disclosures in on a securities agent, and I had called I'd called FINRA, and they were happy to share information verbally with me about what they were working on and how terrible this individual was, and that their intentions were to file, right? And so we were essentially performing like a parallel proceeding, if you will. I was pursuing them, speaking with the victim about his interpretation of the promissory note and things of that nature. And I think it's around $250,000. And it was a pretty serious case. His daughter had to quit college, and he had to have medical, he couldn't pay for some medical visits, and pretty sad deal. But FINRA did their part in a license sanction, and ultimately that case was taken to the federal agency for where he was put in prison. But that foundation of that initial disclosure documents as physical evidence is really important in there. And I just want to point out kind of on the criminal side how important that might be. After you. Okay, sorry.
And is everybody familiar with the RIARS database, what that is? Okay, so for those who are not familiar, so that is a database the NAIC maintains of formal adjudicated actions that state insurance regulators have taken. And states voluntarily report that information to the NAIC. One of the, which going back to Courtney's comments, one of the things we don't include in there are, so if a securities department has taken an action, that information is not going into the RIARS database. So it's up to each individual state to report that data to the NAIC. Courtney had also mentioned this, the monthly FINRA reports. That information is not going into the NAIC's RIARS database either. Again, unless a state is taking a particular regulatory action against an individual. So there is a origin code tied to the FINRA. So we have a code in the database to try to link up and identify, there may be some additional information from FINRA as well. One of the things we have talked a little bit at the NAIC internally, we haven't really talked to a whole lot of regulators, but is there a service that the NAIC could provide to maybe incorporate or enter some of that information from FINRA into the RIARS database? Historically, we've stayed away from all of that, right? Because it is a database that's populated by state insurance regulators and regulatory enforcement actions. And it's really deference to the states in terms of what goes into that database. But I think there is still a challenge to identify and maybe get maybe a little more information in that database on the security side. But so I don't know if you have other thoughts on that, but okay. All right. Courtney, following up with you not knowing who your state securities what are some of the challenges regarding jurisdiction? So I know we talked a little bit about where you see bad actors, you want to do something, but you face jurisdictional issues.
So I think that the biggest solution to some of these challenges is to really, as a licensing regulator, develop relationships with your counterparts in other states. Develop relationships with individuals at FINRA, develop relationships to whoever is in charge or working on any of these other areas that you might need to contact. And that's because in government, as slow as things sometimes go, it really speeds up the process and helps to just pick up the phone and give them a call. I know a lot of people, including myself, hate to hear the phone ring. I have PTSD from phone calls. I don't like it. If you don't leave me a message, I'm not going to call you back on my personal cell phone anyways. But I think that I mentioned last night to someone, and I said a very dated term. I said, you have to have a very full Rolodex as a licensing regulator. And they said, what? And I said, I mean, phone contacts. You have to have a lot of contacts in your phone, but you really do. And as as a director, if, these conferences are great to start establishing the foundations for these relationships. And if, as a director, if you're not the one going to the conference and you're sending staff, send them with a list of goals. Force them to get contact information from 3 new contacts every day, tell them, that they need, for instance, SILA is a conference that I attend every year, and it is licensing centered. So I would send as many staff. It is a wonderful, wonderful conference. I would send a lot of staff to that, send them with goals to, go out and make these contacts. And, it really helps that we all, being from different states, still can come together and work as a team to iron out any issues as soon as they pop up, whether it is with a licensee. I had a call that I handled before this conference where there was some weird information on my file. My NPN didn't match up with the PDB. Another state had a different FEIN that wasn't matching the NPN. So it was a lot of things that boiled down to a typo and one person's system, and it just took all of us getting on the phone and being like, whoa, okay, wait, this is not a big deal, this will be fixed in the morning. So it was just kind of funny because before those calls even get to me at my desk, 3 other people at my department may have talked to them that didn't know that a typo could cause something like this. So I've established some really great relationships with other state regulators, and I will say, one of the sayings that I've always heard is, if you're the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room. I am not in the wrong room because I have so many regulator connections, and they're way smarter than me. So, just have your Rolodex ready, have your contacts, build on that, rely on their brain power and what they have to help you. And, with Jared, we were talking last night too, and I was like, contact us anytime. I know you're kind of new to this. It really helps to have that support from other states. And then I already mentioned my one state contact from the other state agency. So that's really all I have. That just develop relationships, communicate.
Yeah, and that's very good advice. We talked about the Riders database, but Steve, there's certainly not everything right goes through the NAIC, and Jared as well. There are enforcement actions, there are regulatory investigations you have. What do you do? I mean, in terms of kind of immediate engagement with other states, or are there certain enforcement actions you take where somebody's licensed and right, you want to do a bit more than just report it to a database?
Right. So I know that our staff, our enforcement agents, will reach out to other states directly a lot of times. So if Arizona takes an action against a resident or a non-resident even, I kind of actually more on a non-resident perspective, I guess. And it's a significant issue, a revocation of the license, not just because they didn't change their address, not something like that. But a significant revocation, our enforcement agents absolutely will contact other states just directly. It goes in the Riders database still. But I think sometimes situations do arise that need a more manual type of notification, especially when it relates to consumer harm, things along those lines. So it's something that our agents look at when they're doing a case, kind of, I don't want to say we rate levels of severity. But generally that does happen. One issue is more severe than another. And I think that that's really useful. Just by uploading it to Riders, it could take us a couple days to upload an action to Riders, and then the person in Montana who handles that maybe is on vacation, so then it takes them a week or two, and they don't get that notification. So that there are those delays. So I think, to Courtney's point, having the Rolodex, having those contacts in different states. It's a beautiful thing sometimes when you're talking to a applicant or a producer, and they're like, how did you know that happened in Oklahoma? And it's like, well, I know Courtney, And so it is the relationships, and knowing when situations arise that probably should go outside of that normal electronic reporting situation.
Okay.
I would just add on that one, again, from a bit of a different angle. So say this communication is happening between the licensing folks and And on the criminal side or on the licensing side, say for example, we're going to share evidence with you that it maybe have been discovered on our end or our folks have been deposed about, or there's obviously the confidentiality provisions that carry on when we give that data to you. And our FOIA posture, our FOIA response posture should be kind of carried on through your state, or at least we get a notification of kind of that you're going to be compelled to. So I guess when we talk about relationship management and the trust of that we can give records and it maintain the confidentiality, that's all part that goes into working with an entity and making sure we respect each other's boundaries that way. And also, I think what Steve kind of mentioned, when they do a revocation, they reach out to that state. Sometimes you may have engaged that state at the outset prior to the revocation or the hearing. When you do win and do good, get a hold of them. And if you can win some things together, it shows your posture in your state. Like we all should kind of be similar in that regard, the same infrastructure protection for that trusting environment. And so it's a good thing to reach out to them and say, hey, we were successful. Here's an order to that effect. And it's helpful.
All right. We have about 15 minutes left. Excuse me. And I wanted to talk to Jared and others, but Jared in particular has very specific expertise and involvement in prosecution. And I know moving a case through enforcement and getting prosecutors engaged with a particular issue can be a challenge. So I wanted to talk to Jared, start with Jared to talk a little bit about collaboration with prosecutors. How do you develop those relationships? How do you encourage prosecutors, right, to take an insurance or a securities case? And what are some of your kind of tips and best practices for engaging with prosecutors?
Sure. If I could set the stage with this question, typically our cases involve the licensees, right? It's not necessarily so often that we're trying to pursue. We just have been fairly successful with companies behaving themselves, insurance companies behaving themselves. More often, we find ourselves working in the environment of the licensee or the securities agent or insurance agent. We have our infrastructure at the insurance division. So when it goes into prosecutions on the criminal side, we have 8 law enforcement officers. We have 99 counties. That's 99 prosecutorial jurisdictions that they need to pay attention to, build relationships in. We file many cases in federal court on the criminal side, and we work some with our state attorney general's office. So that's just a little bit about Iowa specifically. Prosecution, I want to touch on this administrative. I call it prosecutions, but do we have any prosecutors, administrative or criminal, in the room? 0 will admit it. Okay, I got it. So when you have a case, especially like a securities case that's difficult, or insurance, it's complicated. My work in the police departments that I was in, I would go into the county attorney's office and I would be presenting cases that are in line with what they know: theft charge, burglary, forgery, OWI, and it was, they knew how to process those very quickly. They had budgets designed for that. So that's kind of the infrastructure for the prosecutors at the county level, right? But I was told by one prosecutor at a training one time is, you've got 30 seconds to present a case. So there's a lot going on upstairs with a prosecutor when that's happening. So when we talk about trying to get a case in, it can always be that the prosecutors, it's their problem, right? But really tighten up and dial in your presentation skills. Get to the point, lay the problem at the feet of the prosecutors. It's in this happened to your constituent. There's times where some of the most successful methods that we have implemented is, I don't know if it was just through like fellow law enforcement understanding, but some of the first cases that I got into the federal jurisdiction, I went to the FBI office and we presented kind of what we do in the division, and they saw the numbers. If you're talking insurance fraud and it's a $250,000 house or $400,000 house or a like one of my first cases with a fake death case where she got paid out $250 and the person died in the Philippines, and I was able to present to the FBI field office that I've already basically found the guy, he's alive. And that was the start of that relationship of us getting federal cases in. If you can get the law enforcement officers in these jurisdictions on your side, you are way ahead because they know those individuals. They've prosecuted cases with those individuals before. And the next step we did after already kind of having that relationship, having a federal win, we then, Commissioner Oman, which was Deputy Commissioner at the time, and Commissioner Gearhart agreed to us to invite the Southern District U.S. Attorney's Office to our office to present 3 cases. And it was just a kind of a ceremonial thing to demonstrate for them that our commissioner and our deputy commissioner are invested in what we're doing here. And we have 3 great cases that we'd like to present to you. And, of course, they ran us through the ringer on the physical evidence related to it right in front of our commissioners. That was fun. But they accepted them. And in fact, one was 10 years old, and they ran it through kind of like a bank charge and got it. But so those are, so when it's about reaching out. And when I talk about reaching out to these various prosecutors and going, we don't have a case right now, but here's what I do. And we've got, we're going to see some in your area and maybe start to think about that, teach them. Now, it's not always successful because when I started with the, as the Fraud Bureau Director, we went over to the Attorney General's office. And I was also receiving the responsibility of working in the Market Regulation Bureau, which was new to a police officer, complaints and market conduct, things of that nature. But the key point behind what I'm saying is we went over there, told them, hey, here's what we're doing, here's what we got. And I got this nice reception of, well, we give cases to you guys and you don't do anything with them. Well, it's great to meet you. Did I do my research initially? Yes, I knew that we gave stuff to them as well, and they weren't doing anything. But it wasn't about that. It was let's talk about how we get to where we want, because we want consumer protection attorneys to start prosecuting some of the cases that it says in code that they will prosecute. So that's a key thing. That relationship management is key. Reaching out. One of the other things is just understanding what they do. I wouldn't call them up and go, hey, we've been talking about your office over here and we're just actually wondering what you guys even do over there. Not necessarily the greatest approach, but to go have that relationship or that conversation is really a way to start getting cases in easier to these prosecutorial jurisdictions and getting your name on the map.
All right, thank you. And Courtney and Steve, do you work directly with prosecutors, or do you take cases and move on all? Okay.
No, they said I use too many unprofessional words to talk about. I'm just kidding. No, our fraud division is really good about having those relationships. So we refer everything that's outside of, a routine licensing review. We refer everything to the fraud division and kind of let them handle it until they need to bring us in. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and our fraud division, if it's a criminal situation, completely separated from all of us. If it's an administrative civil issue, then our fraud unit doesn't handle it, our enforcement division.
Okay. All right. So the final bullet point up there, criminal versus civil prosecution, and kind of jumping back to Jared a little bit, to talk a little bit about how you decide which path to take. And at what point, once you decide that, what changes, right? What changes in terms of your investigation and evidence collection?
So with all of this responsibility being within the insurance division in Iowa, it's a pretty good deal, because you really can control the narrative and make certain that you have the proper, or what I call like the proper deterrence approach, or specific and general deterrence, that kind of those concepts of, if you got to make it sting when when some of these people do this conduct, like for example, out of I think there's 218,000 insurance producers authorized to conduct business in the state of Iowa, like right now. And so out of the year, you might have 40, 30 pop their head up seeking your attention on a particular matter. Well, give them the full service, right? So when we look at this, when I think about this question of whether we go criminal or civil, I don't view it as a either or necessarily. I maybe an either or in a timing kind of perspective, because you have a duty under the licensure. If there's an evidence of criminal activity, we have our fraud bureau has a duty to report that like there's a licensing regulation type or issue that needs to be addressed, and our licensing people have a duty to report that evidence of criminal activity to our licensing or our fraud bureau. But as we look at whether we choose what path, I think leaders at your divisions really have the best vantage point on case. For example, labor goes into this. Does the fraud bureau right now have enough time on their plate to get immediate action for this individual because he or she is still out there, right? We often will consider parallel proceedings. It's complicated a little bit. I guess the term that I would caution you if you're doing parallel proceedings in your agencies would be like acting under federal law enforcement. So that's where maybe law enforcement might seek out from a regulator that has specific authority to force insurance licensees to talk with them, to produce stuff. And that's always really been a very careful subject with our office. We've trained it well to not do that. But we do have the design is really the individuals in the license or on the civil side are to report things into the criminal or into the fraud bureau for the criminal case, and really there's not a lot of reciprocation back and words. The technical people on the civil side do produce information up. So when we get into thinking about whether it's goes criminal, goes civil, there's again the timing thing, the labor input availability. But we both have a duty to take care and notice up the public and get a summary cease and desist against that individual because they're out there still doing it, potentially. Intervene in some way on the civil side while the criminal case continues to work. I think the best kind of way to really contemplate that is like using common sense. What is really the remedy for this person? If they stole from an elderly individual, they don't have any, that person needs to be arrested, in my opinion, in Iowa. And so we will share it with them, but that's where we contemplate whether we also need a summary cease and desist or not. Because in Iowa, you got to, within 30 days, be ready for hearing if it goes that direction. I have a longer list of like, when we think about like prioritization of cases, sophisticated means used, vulnerable, elderly people, large monetary losses, all those sorts of things go into the timing issue. The money's going to go away in these accounts. If you don't forfeit that or freeze it, it's going to go. So that's kind of some of the concepts that we contemplate when we're deciding which case goes where and when.
All right, well, thank you. We only have about another minute or so left, but are there questions from the audience? Any items we've covered that you want to go back and ask a question of the panelists?
Tim, we did have a comment in the chat back on sharing of enforcement actions. Connecticut attaches our enforcement actions directly to license in SBS, and they can be downloaded by other regulators or the public by viewing the Verify a License section. Connecticut final orders are considered public documents.
Did you guys, maybe just real quickly,
I'm
You
intrigued by
post
that.
enforcement actions
We
on the website.
we post them on our website. I wasn't aware of a way to attach them with an SBS, but I'm going to look into that because I'm interested in that. But yeah, that was something I missed actually in my conversations earlier about sharing. It's huge if you can get your enforcement actions posted on your website because that avoids even a phone call then sometimes.
Okay.
I think Oklahoma, I think they're on the website. They may not be up to date as of today's date. It's not my fault. No, but I really do think that I believe that ours are also on the website. But yeah, the SBS thing is really interesting. I'm going to look into that too. So
All right.
Yeah, ours are posted on our website, but that's an interesting perspective to post them in SBS.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's give a round of applause for the panelists. Hey.